For 1,200 years, an entire city vanished without a trace. No ruins, no remains, nothing. Historians called it a myth, a legend, a story invented by ancient Greeks who had too much imagination. The city was called Heracleion, or Thonis if you were Egyptian. The greatest port city in all of Egypt, the gateway through which every merchant ship from the Mediterranean had to pass, a city of temples and markets and gold, a city that simply ceased to exist around 800 CE and was not seen again for 12 centuries. In the year 2000, a French marine archaeologist named Franck Goddio dropped beneath the surface of Abu Qir Bay, just off the northern coast of Egypt, just 45 feet down. He shone his torch into the darkness and saw temples and statues and streets. An entire ancient city sitting on the ocean floor, perfectly preserved, exactly where history said it never existed. What Goddio found that day would take the next 2 decades to fully excavate. And what came out of that water, piece by piece, statue by statue, inscription by inscription, rewrote what we knew about ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and the movement of civilization across the ancient world. Today, we go in, piece by piece, discovery by discovery. Down into the city that history forgot. Let us be precise about how this happened, because the precision makes it more extraordinary. Franck Goddio was not looking for Heracleion specifically. He was conducting a systematic sonar survey of Abu Qir Bay, mapping the seafloor, looking for Napoleon's sunken fleet from the Battle of the Nile in 1798. The sonar began returning anomalies. Geometric shapes, regular lines, right angles. The ocean floor does not make right angles. Goddio sent divers down. The first diver surfaced and said 3 words: "There's something." 6 for ships, 700 anchors, 16-foot statues, all of it sitting on the seafloor, 45 feet down, 6 kilometers off the coast of Egypt. In water so close to shore that on a calm day you could almost see the bottom from a boat. The city had been there the entire time. Nobody had looked. In the first years of the excavation, as the Goddio team began systematically working through the site, they began recovering statues. Not fragments, not weathered stumps, complete statues. One of the first major recoveries was a statue of a pharaoh, standing 5.4 meters tall, carved from pink granite, still bearing the original red paint on its crown, the hieroglyphic inscriptions on its base still perfectly legible. This statue had been underwater for 1,200 years, and it looked like it had been placed there last week. Hieroglyphic texts still legible after 1,200 years, underwater, containing historical information that exists nowhere else on Earth. The ocean had not just preserved the buildings. It had preserved the documents. The records, the administrative tablets, the religious inscriptions, the historical record of a city that history had declared a myth, preserved more completely than almost any site that remained on dry land. One of the recovered stele, the Decree of Sais, was an exact copy of a decree previously known only from a version found at the Nile site of Naucratis. The Heracleion copy filled in gaps in the text that the Naucratis version had left incomplete. A document completed by its underwater copy after being separated for 2,500 years, 60 for ships resting on the seafloor of Abu Qir Bay in and around the ancient harbor of Heracleion. The largest collection of ancient ships ever found in a single archaeological site. And the diversity of those ships tells a story that historians had not fully understood before this discovery. 700 anchors. From ships representing Egypt, Greece, Phoenicia, the major maritime cultures of the ancient Mediterranean. In a single harbor. The ancient world was more connected than historians had believed. More trade, more movement, more cultural exchange. And all of it was flowing through Heracleion. Every merchant arriving in Egypt from the Mediterranean was legally required to pass through Heracleion first. Taxes collected here, goods declared here, religious observances performed here, at the temple of Amun-Gareb, before anyone was permitted to travel further into Egypt. Heracleion was not just a city. It was a checkpoint, a gateway. the single choke point through which the wealth of the Mediterranean world passed into the most powerful civilization on Earth. And then it vanished in approximately 800 CE, and the name was forgotten by 900 CE for years after the discovery. The question that Goddio's team kept returning to was not what was there. It was how it got there. Heracleion sat on a series of islands and sand banks in the Nile Delta. Islands and sand banks built up over centuries, sedimentary formations that are inherently unstable, and beneath those sand banks, a specific geological vulnerability, a matter of hours. Not years, not decades, not a slow decline. The most important port in Egypt, with its temples, its statues, its streets, its ships, its market stalls, its people, descended into the seafloor in a matter of hours, which is why it was so perfectly preserved. The buildings did not collapse outward, their walls crumbling, their stones scattering. They sank vertically into the sediment. Held in place by the very material that swallowed them, like objects pushed into wet concrete. And then the sediment sealed over them, and the sea covered that. And within a generation, the people who had lived there were gone, scattered, absorbed into the Egyptian interior. And Heracleion became a story, and then a legend, and then a myth, and then nothing. Ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. Two of the most studied civilizations in human history. Their relationship, their cultural exchange, their shared history has been analyzed for centuries, and yet Heracleion, the place where that relationship was physically centered, was unknown for approximately 400 years. From the 6th century to the 2nd century BCE, Heracleion was the only point of official entry for Greek merchants entering Egypt. Every Greek trader, every Greek philosopher, every Greek soldier, if they came to Egypt, they came through Heracleion, a cultural laboratory. Greek and Egyptian gods worshipped side by side in the same temple. Greek merchants and Egyptian priests performing ceremonies together. Two of the greatest civilizations in human history, finding common ground in a city that history forgot for 12 centuries. Herodotus wrote about Heracleion. He had been there. Diodorus Siculus described it. Ancient sources confirmed its importance, and then it sank, and the sources were dismissed as mythology. And 2,000 years of our understanding of Greek-Egyptian cultural exchange was built on the assumption that the place where that exchange was centered had never truly existed. Scientists still don't fully understand the complete extent of what Heracleion's archives contain. The translation and analysis of recovered texts is ongoing. Each new tablet potentially contains information about the ancient world that exists nowhere else. Franck Goddio has been excavating Heracleion for 25 years. His team has recovered 64 ships, 700 anchors, thousands of artifacts, dozens of major statues, hundreds of inscribed tablets, gold coins, bronze instruments, jewelry, religious objects, and they estimate they have found 5% of the site, a sunken Greek neighborhood, wooden furniture still intact, ceramic vessels with original contents still inside. At greater depth, better preserved than the sections closer to the surface. The deeper you go, the better the preservation, the more intact the history, the more complete the record. The sections of Heracleion that have never been touched, the 95% still on the seafloor, may contain the most complete archive of ancient Mediterranean civilization ever recovered. Libraries. Administrative records, religious texts, personal documents. The private correspondence of merchants and priests from 2,500 years ago, all of it potentially sitting in the sediment of Abu Qir Bay, protected by the same mechanism that destroyed the city. The liquefaction that swallowed everything whole also sealed it perfectly from the outside world. 6 segments, a city dismissed as myth, found by a man looking for something else. Statues pulled from the water still wearing their original paint, containing inscriptions that completed documents discovered on dry land. 60 for ships and 700 anchors, confirming a vision of the ancient world more connected and more global than historians had imagined. A catastrophic collapse, not gradual decline. swallowing the most important port in Egypt in a matter of hours, a cultural laboratory where Greek and Egyptian civilization built the foundations of the Hellenistic world, and which history had dismissed as a story, and 95% of it still on the seafloor. History is not a fixed thing. It is assembled from the evidence that survived, and the evidence that survived on dry land, in museums, in archives, is only a fraction of what once existed. Most of what happened in the ancient world was never written down. Most of what was written down was lost. Most of what was built has crumbled, and most of what remains, the portion that survived long enough for us to find, has not yet been found. It is sitting on seafloors, under deserts, beneath the foundations of modern cities, in caves that have not been entered, in formations that have not been drilled. Heracleion spent 1,200 years being called a myth. It took one man with a sonar device and 45 feet of water to prove it was history. How many other myths are history? How many other stories we dismissed because we hadn't found the evidence are true? How many other cities are down there, in bays we survey for other reasons, waiting for someone to notice the right angles on a sonar screen? Heracleion waited 1,200 years. It was patient. History always is. If this changed how you see history, hit like, subscribe to Axiom Void for weekly dives into the discoveries that rewrite what we thought we knew. Drop a comment. What do you think is in the remaining 95% of Heracleion? And what other lost cities do you think are waiting to be found? Stay curious. Keep looking. See you in the next one.